I've been working the late shift at a modest convenience store in a sleepy outlying town for the past 3 years. I'm Sam, and I always assumed my routine at Midnight Mart would remain uneventful. Yet nothing could have prepared me for the eerie cascade of events that unfolded one bitter autumn evening, shattering every notion of normalcy I once held dear. It was an unusually overcast evening, the sky a dull canvas of purples and grays that seemed to swallow every star in its expanse. I locked up for the night at 11 p.m., the store's neon sign flickering like a tired heartbeat against the encroaching darkness. The wind carried whispers, and the gentle patter of rain on the roof did nothing to ease the unsettled feeling growing in my stomach all day. I've always been a creature of habit. My shift was predictable, stocking shelves, keeping the aisles tidy, and greeting the few loyal customers who preferred the sanctuary of a 24/7 store during the odd night hours. The routine was comforting, a steady rhythm in an unpredictable world. Yet, that night, something felt off. I remember sitting behind the counter, sipping on a lukewarm cup of coffee, when I noticed the store's clock blinking in a stuttered rhythm. It was as if time itself had taken a momentary pause. I glanced up, half expecting to see a malfunctioning digital display, just a simple technical hiccup. But no, the clock's erratic behavior was the least of my concerns. Just as I began to dismiss the oddity, the automatic door creaked open. I looked up, half expecting to see one of my regulars. Instead, a tall, gaunt figure stood at the threshold, shrouded in shadows. The figure was cloaked in a long, dark coat, and the most unsettling detail was that nothing about its face was visible. Not even a pair of eyes peeked out from beneath the hood. "Evening," I managed to say, my voice betraying a hint of nervousness. The figure said nothing in reply, merely nodded and drifted silently into the store, leaving a trail of cold air in its wake. I tried to shake off the chill that had suddenly gripped me. "It's probably just a local with a flair for the dramatic," I told myself, trying to laugh off the encounter. I resumed my duties, but the mysterious presence lingered in the back of my mind. Every time the door opened thereafter, I couldn't help but scan the darkness beyond, half expecting that same faceless figure to reappear. As the night wore on, the atmosphere inside Midnight Mart began to change. It started with small, inexplicable occurrences. A flicker in the overhead lights that wasn't there before, the soft hum of static emanating from the old radio in the corner, and a constant, almost imperceptible sound that resembled distant footsteps. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. One rainy hour, while restocking shelves near the back, I heard a scraping sound coming from behind the storage room. My heart pounded as I crept toward the source of the noise. The storage room door was slightly ajar, and when I pushed it open, the lights seemed to dim even further. The familiar scent of cardboard and dust was replaced by something colder, an odor that reminded me of damp earth and decaying leaves. Inside, I found nothing unusual except for a single smeared handprint on the wall. It was smeared in a dark, almost black substance that I couldn't quite place. I wiped my hand against my pants, trying to steady my nerves. "It's just my imagination," I muttered, but deep down, I wasn't convinced. Over the next few days, the incidents increased. The once quiet hum of the store was now punctuated by unexplained sounds. A whisper in the dead of night, the faint clatter of objects that should have been still. Each time, I would check the security cameras, an old, clunky system that barely captured the details, but they revealed nothing out of the ordinary. No one ever came near the storage room again, and yet the handprint remained, as if mocking my inability to explain it. One particularly stormy night, as thunder rumbled across the sky, I was startled by a sudden knock at the door. I wasn't expecting any deliveries, and the knock came from a part of the store that should have been empty. I hesitated, then moved to answer it. As I opened the door, the wind howled, and I glimpsed a shadow darting away into the darkness. I was alone, but the eerie sensation of being followed was impossible to ignore. I returned to my post, my hands trembling as I tried to focus on my work. Now and then, as I sat down during a brief lull in the chaos, I couldn't help but reflect on my life and the choices that led me here. I had always taken pride in my ability to remain calm under pressure, to face challenges with a level head. But tonight, as I reviewed the events, I realized that fear had its own agenda. It crept up quietly, like the cold seeping through a poorly sealed window, until it overtook every rational thought. I began to question everything I had believed about my environment. The small town I thought I knew so well now seemed layered, with secrets, each dark corner hiding a story of its own. I recalled local legends of restless spirits and mysterious apparitions, tales whispered over cups of coffee in the early morning hours. At first, I had dismissed them as fanciful stories, meant to scare children. But now, as the night deepened and the shadows grew longer, I wasn't so sure. Then came the day when things took a turn for the inexplicable. It wasn't just the one shadowy figure anymore. There were signs that something else was happening. I started to receive anonymous notes slipped under the door at closing time. The handwriting was jagged and hurried, and the messages were cryptic. "They're watching from the corners. Trust no shadow." I confided in a few trusted colleagues, but they brushed it off as a prank or the ramblings of a troubled mind. Still, I couldn't ignore the disquiet that had taken root within me. I began to piece together a series of occurrences that, when viewed collectively, painted a picture of something deeply unsettling. One evening, while scanning the aisles for stray products, I heard a familiar scraping sound coming from the back of the store. My heart hammered as I approached, recalling the handprint from the storage room. But this time, the sound was accompanied by a soft, melodic hum, an eerie tune that seemed to float on the air. I followed the sound, my footsteps muffled by the thick, wet carpet of spilled water, until I reached the produce section. There, in the dim glow of a flickering overhead light, I saw a figure standing near the apple display. It was the same faceless silhouette, but this time it was not alone. Behind it, in the reflection of a glass case, I caught sight of another shadow, more solid and human in form, watching intently. I froze, unable to move, as the two figures slowly turned toward me. For a moment, our eyes met, if you could call it that, as neither revealed any visible features. Then the figures melted into the darkness as if they had never been there at all. I stumbled back, my mind racing to rationalize what I had just seen. Could it be that the notes, the sounds, and the inexplicable handprint were all connected? I felt as if I were standing at the precipice of a truth too horrible to comprehend. The heighty night that shattered my fragile sense of reality came unexpectedly. I was closing up when the store's security system blinked on with an alert that no one had been detected entering or leaving for hours. The lights dimmed further, casting elongated shadows that seemed to twist and writhe against the walls. I could feel the oppressive weight of unseen eyes upon me, and my pulse quickened. Without warning, the store's front door burst open with a force that sent a cascade of rain and wind flooding inside. Standing in the doorway was the shadowy figure, now unmistakably the harbinger of all that was wrong. Its presence was overwhelming, a suffocating darkness that pressed in on every side. I could barely breathe as I watched it step forward, its features still hidden, but an aura of malevolence radiating from its being. In that moment, time seemed to slow. The familiar hum of the store's refrigerator, the distant rumble of thunder, and the steady drip of water from a leaky pipe all coalesced into a cacophony of foreboding sounds. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and insistent, as if it were trying to warn me of the impending doom. "Who are you?" I managed to choke out, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and defiance. The figure did not speak. Instead, it moved, closer, and the air around us grew impossibly cold. I noticed, almost instinctively, that there was something disturbingly human in the way it moved. A subtle hesitation, a pause that hinted at uncertainty, or perhaps sorrow. My mind reeled as memories of local folklore flooded in. Stories of a lost soul, condemned to wander between worlds, seeking solace or redemption. Then, as if in response to my unspoken, the store's lights flickered violently, plunging me into intermittent darkness. In those brief moments when the store was plunged into shadow, I thought I saw the figure's face, an expression of profound anguish and desperation. But as quickly as it appeared, it was swallowed by the darkness once again. I took a hesitant step backward, my mind desperately grasping for a rational explanation. Was this some elaborate hoax? A figment of my overactive imagination, fueled by the isolation of my night shifts? But deep down, I knew that what I was experiencing was real, and it was far more terrifying than any prank or trickery. In the aftermath of that chilling encounter, everything changed. I found myself trapped in a cycle of dread, unable to shake. The feeling that the boundary between the natural and the supernatural had been irreversibly breached. Each night became a test of my sanity as I continued to work the closing shift, haunted by the recurring presence of the faceless visitor and the unsettling whispers that seemed to emanate from every corner of the store. I began to document every occurrence in a small leather-bound notebook, a habit born of both necessity and the desperate need to assert some semblance of control. I wrote down the times when the lights flickered, the exact moments when the mysterious knocks echoed through the empty aisles, and even the peculiar temperature drops that seemed to signal the figure's approach. My writing became a frantic chronicle of my descent into a living nightmare. One evening, as the rain hammered the windows with relentless fury, I found a new note tucked between the pages of my notebook. This one was different. Its handwriting was more deliberate, the message even more foreboding. The store is a threshold. He walks between your world and his. You must never let him in fully. I stared at the note for several agonizing minutes, the words searing themselves into my mind. Who was he? And what did it mean to be a threshold? My thoughts were interrupted by the sudden shriek of the store's alarm system. I rushed to the back, heart pounding in my ears, only to find that the alarm was triggered by nothing more than a flickering fluorescent light. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh, a short, bitter laugh that quickly dissolved into a heavy silence. Yet, the alarm's insistent wail felt like a clarion call to the unknown forces that now roamed the store. As weeks passed, the encounters grew more frequent and intense. I began to see fleeting images in the reflection of the freezer doors. A pale face contorted with grief, eyes filled with endless sorrow. On other occasions, I heard the soft, mournful strains of a lullaby that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The store, once a bastion of familiarity, had become a labyrinth of inexplicable terror. I attempted to alert my supervisor and a few regular customers, but their reactions were always dismissive. "It's just the mind playing tricks on you," they said. "Long nights do that." But deep down, I knew that the terror was not in my head. It was real, tangible, and growing stronger with each passing night. One particularly harrowing evening, as I was preparing to close up, the power suddenly went out. The sudden darkness was absolute, swallowing every last bit of light from the store. I fumbled for my phone to use its flashlight, and in that narrow beam, I saw them. Multiple shadowy figures moving slowly among the aisles. They were not all faceless. Some wore expressions of despair, others of rage. I couldn't tell if they were memories of lost souls or spectral warnings. But one thing was clear. The store had become a nexus for something beyond my understanding. Desperation clawed at me as I tried to re-establish control. I checked the doors, ensuring that they were locked, but the sense of vulnerability was overwhelming. I retreated to the office, where the security monitors provided a distorted view of the store. There, in the grainy black and white footage, I saw the silhouette of the faceless figure lingering by the entrance. Its presence was a silent, ominous threat, as if it were daring me to confront the darkness head-on. The night that truly broke the dam of my fear came on a night much like any other. A storm raged outside, and the wind carried the scent of rain and decay. I had just finished my routine inventory check when the door's chime echoed through the silent store. I froze, knowing that the figure was due to appear at any moment. My skin prickled as I listened to the distant patter of raindrops and the intermittent hum of the refrigerator. Moved in unison, their presence almost ritualistic, a dark procession that filled me with a paralyzing dread. The lead figure, the one I had seen so many times, now advanced slowly, its form almost dissolving into the darkness as it moved. "Who are you?" I demanded again, my voice steadier than I felt. But this time, instead of a whispered response, I heard a chorus of voices, low and sorrowful, as if the store itself were speaking through them. The voices spoke of regret and eternal waiting, of boundaries crossed and a world that should never have met ours. I couldn't decipher every word, but the overall message was clear. I was witnessing a convergence of lost souls and something far more sinister. A being that existed in the liminal space between life and death. The confrontation reached its peak when the lead figure stepped so close that I could feel an icy breath on my cheek. In that moment, all the memories of local legends and ghost stories collided within me. I recalled the tale of a man who'd lost everything to a mysterious entity, a shadow that appeared in the dead of night, leaving nothing but despair in its wake. I wondered if I was fated to share that same destiny. The shadow's presence seemed to press upon my very soul, and for a few agonizing seconds, I felt as if time had frozen. Every heartbeat, every thought, every whispered word suspended in a void of terror. I knew then that my life, as I had known it, was irrevocably altered. I was no longer the mundane convenience store clerk I once was. I was a witness to something beyond human comprehension. After that night, an eerie calm descended over Midnight Mart. The shadowy figures no longer roamed in full force, and the supernatural occurrences subsided to a mere murmur, a constant reminder of that fateful confrontation. I resumed my duties, each shift a delicate balance between routine and the ever-present threat of the unknown. Yet I could never shake the lingering questions. Who was the figure? What was the nature of the threshold that the anonymous note had mentioned? And most disturbingly, Was I truly safe within the walls of my store? Or was I merely a guardian for something that lurked just beyond the veil of normalcy? One evening, as I was closing up, I heard a faint knock at the door. A knock that resonated with a deliberate, almost rhythmic precision. I approached the door with a mixture of trepidation and resigned curiosity, wondering if this final act was meant to be a final confrontation or a final farewell. I opened the door slowly, half expecting the faceless figure to stand there once, again. Instead, I found only darkness beyond the threshold, the rain cascading over the pavement like tears from a forgotten sorrow. The knock echoed one last time before fading into the night, leaving me with a profound sense of unresolved mystery. I returned to the counter, my mind awash with conflicting emotions, fear, relief, and an overwhelming need to understand what had transpired. My notebook, filled with frantic scribbles and cryptic notes, now served as the only tangible record of an encounter that defied logic. In the weeks that followed, I began to experience moments of lucidity amid the lingering dread. I tried to convince myself that perhaps the supernatural events were simply a trick of the mind, a byproduct of isolation and long hours under the harsh fluorescent lights of the store. But every time I closed my eyes, I could still see the faceless figure, feel its cold breath, and hear the haunting chorus of voices that had spoken of eternal waiting. I started to research local folklore and history, searching for any clues that might explain the inexplicable. I learned of an old legend about a man who had run a small store in a remote town decades ago, a man who vanished under mysterious circumstances. Some said he had made a deal with forces beyond human understanding. Others claimed that his disappearance was the result of a curse that bound his soul to the very establishment he once owned. I couldn't help but wonder if my midnight mart was built upon that same cursed ground, if my fate was entwined with an ancient and malevolent force. Yet, no matter how many theories I entertained, one thing remained certain. The shadowy figure and its eerie entourage were not simply figments of my imagination. They were real, tangible presences that had invaded my life, leaving behind scars that no amount of daylight could fully erase. As autumn gave way to winter, the nights grew longer and the cold more biting. I found myself spending more time at the store, unable to leave the place that had become both my sanctuary and my prison. I began to notice subtle changes in the Ibuan-e environment. The once pristine shelves now bore faint, almost imperceptible markings, as if something had traced its presence there with a finger dipped in the ink of despair. One bitterly cold night, as I sat alone in the dim light of the store's back office, I felt a strange mix of resignation and determination. I knew that I couldn't run from what was haunting me forever. The time had come to confront the darkness, to force answers out of the silence that had long enveloped Midnight Mart. I gathered my courage and stepped out into the storm. The rain pelted me as I made my way to the small parking lot, every step resonating with a newfound resolve. I was determined to follow the trail of clues, those anonymous notes, the spectral sightings, the inexplicable noises, and discover the truth behind the curse that seemed to be tethering me to this haunted place. As I walked toward an abandoned building at the edge of the lot, a structure I'd always assumed was nothing more than an old warehouse, I felt an intense pull. It was as if the building itself was calling me, inviting me to uncover its hidden secrets. Inside, amidst the decay and forgotten relics of a bygone era, I found an old ledger tucked away behind a collapsed shelf. Its pages were filled with names, dates, and strange symbols that hinted at rituals and bargains made in desperate times. I spent hours poring over the ledger, the words blurring before my eyes as fatigue and dread took their toll. It was clear that those who had come before me had encountered forces beyond comprehension. Their accounts were as fragmented and disjointed as the remnants of their shattered lives, yet a common thread ran through them. A curse that promised eternal vigilance in exchange for a price never fully revealed. I returned to the store with the ledger clutched tightly in my hands, my mind racing with a sense of impending inevitability. The more I learned, the more I understood that I was now a part of this dark tapestry. A guardian, perhaps, or a reluctant witness to a cycle of torment that spanned generations. Midnight Mart was no longer just a convenience store. It had become a threshold, a liminal space where the living and the dead coexisted in uneasy silence. That night, as I sat behind the counter reviewing my notes, I heard the sound of footsteps approaching from the back, a sound that was now all too familiar. The temperature in the room dropped, and I felt the oppressive presence of the faceless figure drawing nearer. With a deep, shuddering breath, I turned to face it. In the dim light, I could see the subtle contours of sorrow and despair etched into its featureless form. It stepped forward slowly, as if compelled by some ancient obligation. "I understand," I whispered, the words trembling on my lips. "I'm ready to learn, to accept what must be done." The figure paused, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a glimmer of something resembling gratitude, or perhaps regret, in the darkness. Behind its hood, it reached out a spectral hand, and I found myself compelled to take it. In that touch, I felt an avalanche of memories, of lives lost, of promises broken, of souls condemned to wander in eternal limbo. The sensation was overwhelming, and I struggled to remain anchored to my own reality. When the connection finally broke, the figure receded into the shadows, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a haunting new understanding. I realized that my journey was far from over. Midnight Mart had become more than just my workplace. It was a crucible where the past, present, and future converged in a dance of light and shadow. I was now a part of something ancient, something that defied explanation, yet demanded my unwavering attention. I continued to work the night shift, each evening a battle between routine and the relentless pull of the unknown. The ledger now lies hidden beneath a false panel in the office, a secret repository of truths too terrible to share openly. I document every unusual occurrence, every whispered word of the past, in hopes that one day I might piece together the full extent of the curse that binds this place. Every time the door chimes unexpectedly, or a cold gust of wind sweeps through the aisles, I am reminded that the boundary between our world and the darkness beyond is perilously thin. I have learned that some doors, once opened, are not easily closed, and that some shadows, once cast, linger long after the light has faded. Even now, as I sit here writing this account, I can't help but feel that I am being watched. The memory of that faceless figure, its sorrowful eyes hidden beneath a hood of darkness, haunts me still. I wonder if, one day, I will find the courage to confront the full extent of the mystery that has entwined itself with my existence. Until then, I remain a reluctant guardian, a keeper of secrets that should perhaps never have been unearthed. I share this story not in search of sympathy, but as a cautionary tale for those who might think that a mundane life, one spent behind the counter of a convenience store, can never be touched by the supernatural. I offer my experience as proof that darkness is never far away. It lingers in the corners of our everyday lives, waiting for the moment when the lights flicker and the familiar becomes something altogether unrecognizable. As I finish my shift tonight, the rain outside has lessened to a soft drizzle, and the neon sign of Midnight Mart buzzes weakly. In the early hours of the morning, I lock the door behind me, step into the cool night air, and pause for a moment to listen to the silence. In that silence, I hear the echo of a final, unanswered knock, a reminder that the mystery is far from over, that the shadowy visitor might return at any moment. So here I stand, at the threshold of a reality I never wished to know, a custodian of a dark secret that has claimed me as much as I have claimed it. And as the first pale light of dawn begins to creep over the horizon, I realize that in this quiet town, beneath the guise of everyday routine, something ancient and relentless continues to stir in the darkness, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to cross the threshold. I often wonder if I will ever escape this unending vigil. Sometimes, as I clean the aisles or count the registers, I catch fleeting glimpses of movement, shadows that should not be there, reflections that vanish when I turn to look. I keep the ledger hidden, a grim reminder of the pact that binds me. I've grown accustomed to the feeling of eyes on my back, and even in moments of fleeting peace, a part of me remains ever alert, always listening for that ominous knock. Perhaps one day, I will uncover the full truth behind the faceless visitor and the curse that haunts Midnight Mart. Until then, I must carry on. My nights a ceaseless battle between the comfort of routine and the persistent intrusion of the unknown. And if you ever find yourself in a small town on a stormy night, seeking refuge in a 24/7 convenience store, remember my story. For in the quiet moments between dusk and dawn, you may also hear a knock, a sign that something is watching from the shadows, waiting to step forward when the time is right. I remain here, a keeper of secrets, a witness to the convergence of our world with something far beyond our understanding. And in that space, where the mundane meets the supernatural, I have learned that some doors, once opened, can never be closed. I share this